Okay, we're going to do a Rashi. Today is Friday. We're going to do a Rashi from the sixth Aliyah, and also as a bonus, one Rashi from the seventh Aliyah as well. So we've been talking a little bit about the story of Yaakov's departure, Yaakov and his family's departure from Lavan's house. And of course, Lavan gets a little bit upset that they start to leave, that they start to go away. Um, and he wants to chase after them to bring them back. The Torah tells us, "Vayavo Elohim el Lavan ha'arami b'chalom halayla." Hashem appears to Lavan. Now, that's a major thing. Lavan reaches a level of prophecy in which Hashem speaks to him. So for everything we think about Lavan as a trickster and maybe a Ramai, a Rasha, whatever we want to call him, he does reach a level that most of us will never reach in our lifetime. Now, that prophecy might have been just in service of the great tzaddik Yaakov and his family, but nonetheless, he does receive prophecy. And Hashem tells him in that dream, Vayomer lo, Hishamer lacha, pen tedaber im Yaakov mitov ad ra. Watch what you say to Yaakov. Watch what you say to Yaakov, because essentially I have his back. You know, this is a plan that is going forward. You're not going to be able to stop it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu really alters Lavan's whole approach as to how he would encounter Yaakov later on. And in the end, they do make a bris of some sort at Gal Eid. Yagar Sahadusa, as the Torah says, they make a block of stones to be able to understand that there is an agreement between them. My turf is still here, your turf is from here on. And Lavan does yet let Yaakov and his children leave. So this dream is critical in terms of the development of the story. But this expression is interesting. Be careful not to speak to Yaakov mitov ad ra, from good to bad. Now, you might have expected Hashem to say to him, don't speak anything bad to Yaakov. But what does mitov ad ra mean? Anything from good to bad. So on the surface, you might have said mitov ad ra just means anything, right? From any extreme. From this extreme to that extreme, don't say anything. But that really can't be what Hashem is telling Lavan. Don't say anything. So as I said before, maybe it means don't say anything, but be careful of what you say anywhere on the spectrum. Mitov ad ra. No matter what you're going to say, just be careful about the way that you're going to say it. Hishamer lecha. Be guarded a little bit in the way that you pronounce it, in the way that you express it. But Rashi has an interesting line here, which I don't know or don't think is necessarily the pshat of this text, but I think is something interesting for us to think about. He says, why does it say mitov ad ra, from good to bad? It says, kol tovasan shel rishayim ra hi etzel tzadikim. Why? Because even the good stuff of a Rasha feels bad to a tzaddik. It's something to think about. A tzaddik is a person at such a great level who is so pained by the rishus, by the evil of the world, so pained by the evil that exists within people, that anything that emerges from that Rasha, even something that could have been tov from the perspective of the Rasha, to the tzaddik feels, there's an ach factor, so they say, to anything that the Rasha pronounces, to anything that they say, to anything that they declare that they do, because of who it's coming from. Now, on the one hand, that's a pretty negative thing. You would expect someone who's at the level of a tzaddik to be nuanced enough to see when something is coming from a Rasha, well, they may be a Rasha, but here's a kernel of good that's emerging from them. I don't think this Rashi is going counter to that kind of philosophy. I think that's a philosophy that's important and powerful and correct. I think it's just saying that a tzaddik, they can see good coming from a Rasha, and they can see that from the perspective of the Rasha, that's good. But just the whole mahus, the whole being of the Rasha is so painful to a tzaddik that almost any form of the encounter reminds them of the rishus of that person, of the evil that exists in the world. And living with that evil is something that is ra etzel tzaddikim, that's just difficult for a tzaddik to live with. I think whether or not you agree with that philosophy, it's important to think about our sensitivity to the evil in the world. Sometimes we box ourselves in and think, okay, it doesn't affect me, it doesn't come my way, so it exists out there in the world, who cares? But what this Rashi is suggesting is that when you're at the level of certain level of righteousness, certain closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then everything pains you, whether it's inside of you, outside of you, great lengths from you, or across the world. The fact that it exists in God's world is something that should be bothersome, that could be bothersome to us. Okay, one Rashi from, going the wrong direction here. Ran Rashi from the end of the Parsha. Okay. So at the end of the parsha, they part ways, and Yaakov goes along his journey back to the land of Israel. And I just want to point out this Rashi because it brings our story full circle. It says, "Vayakov halach ledarko vayifgeu bo malachei Elokim." Yaakov goes on his journey, and he encounters the malachei Elokim. Now, Rashi points out that this closes out the story that we began with in the beginning of Vayetze. What does it say in the beginning of Vayetze? Yaakov is going on his journey. Vayifga mamakom vayalen sham. He is vayifka. He has this encounter with the makom, vayalen sham. He sleeps there, and then he sees the dream of the malach elokim olim v'yordim bo. And we mentioned over there in the beginning of the parsha that vayifka b'makom means he has an encounter with God and with God's emissaries, his angels. And the reason they're olim v'yordim as opposed to yordim v'olim is because the malachim that escorted him in Eretz Yisrael go up, they depart, and the malachim of Chutz La'aretz come down to escort him on his journey to Lavan's home. Well, now we're in the reverse journey, and it's beautiful because the Torah closes this loop full circle. And it says now that Yaakov is coming back from Lavan's house into the land of Israel, the Torah immediately tells us, Vayifga, again, he has an encounter. Vayifga is encounter with God. Malachei Elokim encounter him again, and what does Rashi say? Malachim shel Eretz Yisrael ba'u likraso lelavoso la'aretz. Why is he having an encounter with Malachim now? I know when he was leaving why he had that encounter. He had to make the deal with God. Okay, if I come back safely, you're going to be my God. I'm going to give you Meiser, all this. Yaakov was worried about his journey. Now Yaakov is on the return. He's going back home to the place that he wants to go. HaKadosh Baruch Hu already commanded him to go. He knows everything's going to be okay. He already had the encounter with God in Lavan's house. We saw that Rashi yesterday. We know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu came to him there already and commanded him to go. What's this encounter about? What's this Vayifgeu bo malachei Elokim? Rashi says it's the end of the story, the end of the loop. Now that he's coming back to the land, the malachim of Chutz La'aretz are going to depart, and the malachim of Eretz Yisrael are going to come back to greet him. Not only are they going to be there to escort him, but they go out to greet him. Such a beautiful image that I love to think about. As Yaakov comes to the land, such a land of kedusha and of holiness and of connectivity to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's like all the malachim are coming to greet him to that special place. I have that image when I come to Israel, when I imagine anyone coming to Israel, even today, that as someone approaches the kedusha of that land, it's not just the excitement of being there. It's not just the first step when you get in there. It's like as if you're on the plane and as you're coming and you're landing in Ben Gurion, all the malachim of Eretz Yisrael are there to greet you. They're there to welcome you. They're there excitedly to see another Jew coming to connect to this special land. And that's an image that I think we can continue to live, an image from the Parsha that perhaps we can experience just a little bit as well. Wish you all a wonderful Shabbos ahead and a great weekend.